Welcome to Touch Technology Review. Today, we're going to be talking about whether you should be buying one of these or one of these in 2021 when you already have an amazing product in your pocket that shoots great photos and is capable of recording video, often up to 4K or even 8K now at incredible frame rates from 60 frames per second to even 240 ultra slow motion? Well, the answer is really dependent on the type of videos that you're looking at producing for YouTube. If you're just creating vlogs where you need a good all-round camera, then an iPhone is going to cut it. But if you have a specific look in mind and you want to get that cinematic look and feel, then really you need to be thinking about purchasing a DSLR or mirrorless camera. And I'm going to explain the things that make these cameras different to an iPhone or an Android phone, and how they're able to allow you to capture a more creative look when it comes to your cinematography, and sometimes even perform better. In fact, most times really perform better when it comes to taking still photos. The first factor has to do with lens quality. Now, although the images are super sharp coming directly out of your phone, the lens is only very small, coming in at usually less than 1 centimeter in diameter, compared to the lens that you might find on a DSLR or mirrorless camera, which is much larger. It has much more glass, which can often allow more light into the image and allow you greater flexibility when selecting your aperture. The aperture allows you to control the amount of background blur you get, and depending on which phone or which lens you're using on your phone, you may have certain limitations there. And that background blur effect never really looks as good as it does when you're using a larger camera. And that has to do a lot with the lens, but also the image sensor, which we'll talk about shortly. So lenses are always going to be better on dedicated cameras, and you don't have any limitations, even though the latest iPhone 12 Pro now has 3 lenses with a wide, mid-range, and long lens. These are limited to specific focal lengths compared to being able to select any focal length you like when you purchase a DSLR or mirrorless camera. So you can get super wide ranges from the mid-range to the very long telephoto lenses, all of extremely high quality. So lens quality is always going to be superior when you're using a dedicated camera with the right lens for the right application. The next thing has to do with manual controls. Now, even though the latest generation of iPhones and Android devices all allow you to now shoot relatively in manual mode, where you can change the shutter speed, the aperture, sometimes even the ISO. If not inherently in the phone app, you can get third-party applications that do extend the possibilities there in shooting in manual mode. It's not the same as shooting in manual on one of these cameras. For example, if I take a look at this Olympus OMD camera, which is one of my favorites for doing street photography and travel, the thing I love about it is the ergonomics. The access to those controls is so intuitive and at your fingertips that it doesn't get in the way of the creativity during the moment when you're taking the shot. So if you're in a rush, if you need to quickly access those features, the ergonomics of a real camera are much better than trying to fiddle around with the screen on your phone. The same applies with a DSLR camera. All the buttons and dials are well situated and really designed with the photographer's point of view in mind and what they're going to be experiencing and what they need to really get the best out of that creative moment and that opportunity. So ergonomics can't be overlooked when it comes to working with real world cameras compared to iPhones. And the next thing that's really important to understand is sensor size. Even though the iPhones can shoot 12 megapixel images, Samsung's can now go up to around 100 megapixels. And when it comes to video, they can shoot in, as I said, 4K, 8K, and whatever resolution they can shoot at. The reality is that the sensor is so small on the phones that even though the megapixel count is high and it sounds great on a brochure, when it translates into reality, being a smaller sensor, they often introduce more noise and they lack the clarity and definition that you get on the sensors on these larger, more professional cameras. So when we go up to a mirrorless camera, we get a micro four thirds sensor, which is really quite a decent quality image and has very minimal noise. But when you go up to a full frame DSLR or mirrorless camera, you get an even superior image, and it shoots in HDR with the greatest clarity and very little pixelation, very little noise or any aberration on the image. The sensor is really clean and the highest quality you can get. Most people can't even tell the difference between the resolution, the bit depth, etc. when you're viewing footage on an iPhone. But if you actually take the footage from an iPhone and a full frame or mirrorless camera and compare them side by side on your monitor when you're in the editing process, quite often you'll see the difference in clarity and bit depth apparent when you're previewing on an actual monitoring screen. So there's definitely an improvement when you go up in quality in terms of image sensor. So for professional video productions, you really can't beat the quality you're getting out of mirrorless and DSLR cameras. The next advantage of getting a camera over an iPhone or Android device is the accessories. Now, these cameras are designed to basically attach accessories very easily, and you can purchase dedicated accessories from the brands or third-party options that work really well with them. One that I use quite often on my DSLR or mirrorless camera is a compact flash unit, which mounts quite nicely on top of the camera, and that allows you to position the flash source away from the lens and produces a much more natural light, along with the fact that it's a much more powerful burst and intense bright light that really lights up a whole room and creates a much more pleasing image compared to the small flashlight that you get on an iPhone. Other accessories include the tripod mount at the bottom and also external microphones which you can attach on that shoe mount on top of either of these cameras. So again, they're really built for purpose. They're designed to be expanded upon, along with those ergonomic advantages that I spoke about earlier. The ability to add attachments very easily onto these cameras make them very appealing for professional applications. And finally, perhaps the most important, if you're doing any type of work that goes longer than a few minutes, you really need to think about getting a camera over an iPhone due to the fact that these have virtually unlimited storage. They all have the ability to either accept an SD card or compact CF card, which allows unlimited swapping over so that you can record for hours and hours on end with very minimal interruption. Have you ever tried to record 4K or 8K video on your mobile phone? If you have, you've probably experienced the frustration of the recording cutting out within just a matter of minutes. Depending on what spec phone you get, quite often the base entry level is only 64, sometimes 128 gigabytes, and you could run out of storage far too quickly for any practical video recording application. So that's a real downside of using your mobile phone for video production, the fact that you run out of storage so quickly. And along with that is the battery drainage. If you are recording in the highest spec modes, you can often experience very small duration of recording. You might find that your battery depletes after half an hour to 1 hour of recording, and then you have to go about charging up your phone, which is really inconvenient. With these larger DSLR cameras, you can get battery pack units that accommodates 2 batteries, giving you around 2 hours of recording time. On the smaller cameras, you can just swap out the battery, have multiple spare batteries available, and with a brief interruption of around 10 seconds, swap out your battery and keep moving. So there are my top 5 reasons, unbiased of course, despite the fact that I use these cameras on a daily basis, for upgrading from a mobile phone to a pro camera to get better results on your YouTube videos. Despite the fact that mobile phones now have specifications in writing at least that seem to mirror or even exceed these cameras, I still think there's a clear advantage just because of that image quality that clearly does exceed what these smartphones are capable of up until this point. So if you are thinking about purchasing a camera, I might leave a link to a few models that I really like at the moment, including the Canon EOS R, which I think is a great camera, the Olympus OMD, and also the Sony A7, which is another great alternative, all at different price points and all very capable of giving you that next level video quality. And I might look at doing a follow-up video where I outline the differences between these cameras and really give you some insight as to the pros and cons of each of the different models. So if you're keen on seeing that video, let me know in the comments box below and I'll look at queuing that up at some point in the future. If you want to see new videos that come out on the channel, feel free to subscribe and you'll be notified as soon as brand new videos become available. See you on the next one. Bye for now.